Thank you. The next issue is economy. The St. Charles County economy and much of the national economy boomed with the new housing construction in the last decade, but that activity has come to a screeching halt. What can Congress do to revive the housing industry? And Ms. Baker, we'll start with you.
Well, what we need to do, everywhere I go, there's a lot of hand-wringing right now, and mostly when I talk with retirees that are really worried about their futures as the stock market begins to crash. We need to lay the groundwork for a recovery to our economy, and it is going to be in the housing market, definitely. It amazes me that when the economic crisis hits Wall Street, all of a sudden everyone perks up and pays attention. But what I'm finding by going through my district is the economic crisis hit my district years ago with people losing their jobs, jobs being shipped overseas, personal incomes dropping, poverty going up and the unemployment rate going up. These are the things, these are the fundamentals of our economics that we need to change. We need to make sure that people have living wages so that they can stay in their homes and they can afford them. When jobs go overseas and people lose their jobs here, of course they're having trouble paying for their mortgages. That's no mystery. So what we need to do is, I think, we need to support tax cuts for working families. And that's what I have done, is I've laid out a plan for economic recovery that includes tax cuts for working families. It is time that we reward not just wealth, but we reward work and working families. I think that that's what will stimulate this economy. What we need to understand is that working families are the gasoline in the economic engine. And if we don't strengthen the working family on a day-to-day basis, then we are going to run out of power in the economic engine. So it is incredibly important that everyday people have a chance to survive and carry on the American dream.
Mr. Luetkemeyer.
The housing problem has started many years ago when we deregulated the financial industry, and then Congress asked the folks who made the loans to loosen up some lending restrictions. And when they did, they kind of hurt some people by getting some people into some homes who couldn't afford those homes. And in order for people to afford homes, they've got to have good paying jobs. They've got to have a job that can support the payment that it takes to make that dream of a home a possibility. Right now our economy is struggling. We need to find a way to get some good paying jobs back. The last thing we need is a tax increase, something that my opponent supports, in the fact that if you don't extend the tax cuts of 2001 and 2003, it will be a $1,700 per person tax increase on the people of this district, and it's going to cost Missourians 20,000 jobs. That is unacceptable. That is not what you call economic progress. That is going backwards. So what we have to do is find a way to create jobs. And I think you do that by letting people have their own funds, keep those dollars in their pocket. The money that's in the people's pocket is their money. It's not Washington's pocket, Washington's money. People in Washington think the money in your pocket is theirs, whether it's in yours or in D.C. That's wrong. That's a liberal philosophy. You have to understand that the money that's in your pocket is yours, whether it's in D.C. or in your pocket. And I think that philosophy has got to be changed. It's got to be thought that way. I think we have an opportunity with this oil situation. As I said earlier, you can bring $700 billion back, put it into our economy. We've got to find a way to encourage businesses to stay here in this country instead of taking jobs overseas. And why are they taking them overseas? Because they can no longer compete with the way that we're producing products here in this country, because of regulation, because of taxation. We have to release those burdens so they can stay here and put good jobs and good people to work. The work ethic of our people is there. We're the finest group of workers, the best trained in the world. We have to put those people to work and give them the opportunity to earn that living so their families can succeed. Thank you.
Rebuttal, Mrs. Baker.
Let's be perfectly clear. My opponent likes to distort my positions, and he did on his rebuttal in the last question, and he did also on his answer in this one. Blaine, there is a clear difference between you and me on taxes. My opponent supports a 23% increase to groceries and gasoline, where I support tax cuts to working families. The actual plan that I will be working on when I'm in Congress would actually, for the average Missourian, for 97.7% of all Missourians, they would get a $1,256 tax cut. The average Missourian would get a $1,256 tax reduction. That's what I'll be working on. My opponent, on the other hand, supports tax cuts for people and millionaires who don't even live in this district. So it is a very, very clear difference in the choice that you can make on who receives a tax benefit. It is time for us to, like I said earlier, reward work and working families in order to jumpstart and stimulate our economy.
Thank you. Our next question gets to the tax cuts. Again, going back to the 2001-2003 tax cuts enacted by Congress, they're up for renewal. So let's have a thorough discussion of whether you would make those cuts permanent, let them expire, or change them some way. And Mr. Luetkemeyer, you get the first shot for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Bob. I think I've already stated I would support extending those tax cuts. I think it's important. The death tax is involved in this. Why is death a taxable event? The marriage penalty is in this extension. Why do we penalize people for being married? It's unconscionable the way that our tax system has developed and evolved into a penalty system rather than a progressive system to allow people to be able to help themselves and their families. My opponent just misstated my position one more time. I do not support a 23-cent income sales tax. The sales tax that she's talking about is a fair tax. I've never said I supported a fair tax. I've always supported the principles of consumption tax, and that's in lieu of all the other income taxes that are out there. To misstate that is wrong, Judy, and I think you ought to be ashamed of yourself to make that sort of a statement when you know it's not true. This is a replacement of one tax for the other. It's not an additional tax. Let's make very clear on that. But again, taxes are at the heart of growth. Our economy has to be cut. Our taxes have to be cut in order for our economy to grow. This last summer, we had a perfect example, $150 billion tax stimulus package, and it worked from the standpoint that what would have happened with our high gasoline prices if we wouldn't have had that stimulus package. As it was, we managed to roll through this thing with less damage than what could have been. I think, again, in fact, what I understand is the liberal leadership in Congress is even thinking now about having another stimulus package next year if they continue to hold the Congress. So they understand that tax cuts work. I think it's important that we understand that the families out here are the best ones who can use those dollars. They understand what their needs are. They can stimulate the economy. Give those dollars to businesses to help create jobs. It's businesses that create jobs, not government. And we have to give them the tools to do that. Less regulation, less taxation, and you'd be surprised what our people can do. We have the best people in the world. Entrepreneurial spirit will take over, and we'll be very successful.
Mrs. Baker.
Let me first say that the sales tax that my opponent is promoting is the fair tax, like he says. And if it was such a good idea, it was up for passage during the Bush administration, and the panel that studied it actually said it was a bad idea. And so they actually rejected the idea that he wants to go back to Washington and try to do, because there's only one way to do it, and that really is to do a 23% increase on groceries and gasoline. These are the very people. I mean, a lot of people don't have enough money for more than groceries and gasolines and perhaps their homes. And so it's very important that we make sure that we do not put more tax burden on the working family, like I've said before. As far as the Bush tax cuts, there are some Bush tax cuts that I think we need to renew. And those are the ones, like I said, there's a high principle here. The tax cuts that will help working families and average everyday Americans so that, like I said, it's the gasoline in the economic engine. We've got to build this economy back up from the bottom so that we can have people who have enough money in their pockets to actually stimulate the economy. So that's the kind of tax cuts that I will be supporting when I go to Congress. I also launched last week a really important idea. I went to Centralia, which is in our district, and I went to B&K. It's a company, small business that's struggling because the larger companies have sent jobs overseas. When we send jobs overseas, these downstream companies, small businesses struggle because they were attached essentially to these companies and trying to support them. This company makes pallets. I proposed a Made in America tax credit that would stimulate the economy, create 1 million jobs would be the goal, and we would make sure that they get a tax credit for every a job that they create in America for an American worker.
Thank you. Mr. Luetkemeyer, 1 minute.
Thank you, Bob. Judy, you continue to misstate my position on the fair tax. I've never said I supported the fair tax. I understand and believe some of the consumption principles of the tax are something we need to consider. I've always said it in that fashion. I've never said it's the answer to all things. Again, it's a substitute for the existing tax system. You take 23 cents and that's your tax, but by the same token, if you take all of the other taxes that are embedded in your products, you lose 22% of whatever's in that product. So actually, it's a net gain of 0. So if you don't understand the fair tax, I suggest you go, there's 2 books by Neil Bortz that are really good that you could use to take a look at. Go to the website, it's very good. But again, I think that at the end of the day, taxes are things that help people to, if you leave those tax dollars in their pockets, those people can be able to do best, whatever it takes to determine how their families are best able to cope with the situations that they're in. Thank you very much.